fear, distress, anxiety. These are all feelings we may get when watching a horror movie or playing a horror game. But none of these are something that we could expect to experience when playing a game meant for kids. Then again, history has showed us that stranger things can happen. But what happens when feelings like these get too intense for small kids? In September 28 of 1998, North America was hit with the worldwide phenomenon of Pokemon, with the first Pokemon world to explore being the region of Kanto, where one of the towns soon became the center of attention for a very particular reason. Lavender Town was the home of a couple of important events in the story of the main game, despite not having any gyms itself, so there is no getting around it. This elevated exposure has shown a particular, rather creepy side of it, that being a really different type of place. For instance, the great emphasis on Pokemon death. Even though there has never been a single Pokemon game in which killable Pokemon appear, and no, not even the first generation, but in here, everyone talks about it without any remorse. Something so out of the ordinary, and with the great exposure to many ghost types that look way creepier than any other Pokemon, make this town an especially unsettling place, especially for a kids game. And then, well, then comes music. Music so peculiar that it's easy to get it stuck in your head, so weird and different compared to all the other town themes, and it's not uncommon to feel like something's wrong. So it was about time for kids to come up with crazy ideas and theories, like the legend of the Lavender Town syndrome. The story that even though American version was disturbing, the Japanese version, which came more than a year prior, was so unbelievably creepy that it led to suicide rates in kids rising. You may have noticed that I said legend and not myth, and probably now be thinking, so what, those terms are interchangeable. Well, in broad terms, a myth is a story that, although very well known, it's entirely false, while a legend has either unverified facts, or quite simply, it's based on true historical events. But come on, it's impossible that the story of a song that causes whoever listens to it to commit suicide is anything less than impossible, right? In the 1930s, in Hungary, a composer by the name Rezső Seres created what would be his most known piece of music, by the name of Gloomy Sunday, or, as it is most commonly known, the Hungarian Suicide Song. It is reported that at least 19 cases of suicide in the decade were attributed to an extreme sense of sadness after listening to this song, to the point that many radio stations decided to ban it altogether from the air. Not only this, but the very own composer took his life around 35 years after the song came out. But this is another urban legend, so in this story, how much is true? Well, it is true that there was a rise in suicide rates in the decade of the 1930s in Hungary, but we need to look at the context. With the starvation, poverty, and the rise of the Nazi Party, well, saying that a pretty sad song was the only cause is more than a hyperbole. Although it is true that the composer committed suicide, it was almost 4 decades after the song. So maybe in a song that can kill people, it's not the music itself, but the sound. Another part of the Lavender Town syndrome says that the victims were only kids, developed headaches, anxiety, and a sudden and violent attitude. But is this even possible for sound to be this dangerous? First, it's easy to debunk the part that says only kids were affected. You see, it's true, as we grow older we stop hearing certain sounds, while younger people can still hear them without a problem. However, this does not mean that those sound waves stop existing when interacting with older people. As such, a lot of the side effects coming from certain sounds can hurt people even if they don't hear anything. And what about the part of the sound making someone violent? In this case, it is weird how reality can be as scary as fiction, if not more. Misophobia is a recent neurological disorder in which a person can become unreasonably violent when exposed to certain sounds. While some of these can be natural in origin, like people eating, clicking sounds, or fidgeting, in many cases these are just repetitive sounds, not unlike a song from a console really limited in space. It is proposed that a reaction because of this disorder can begin to occur at the early age of 9 to 13 years of age. But only the most extreme reactions would generate a violent enough response to try to do something like self-harming. And what about anxiety? This one is the simplest thing to confirm. Well, there exists a phenomenon known as phonophobia, which is really similar to misophobia, but in this case, instead of provoking anger, it provokes fear. However, I don't think that we need to go that far for a solution. You see, one of the best entertainment industries, that of movies, and more specifically horror movies, use what are known as infrasounds. This meaning that the frequency that these sounds have is so slow for the human eye to actually hear. But as I said, not hearing something doesn't mean that it's not there. But just how dangerous are these? Not that much really. A study by the National Toxicology Program determined that the primary effect of infrasound was annoyance. Sure, some people have reported they have felt anxiety because of the sensation of hearing something near them while not actually knowing what it is. But again, in the same study, the specialists found no long-term side effects. And I'm pretty sure that the part about headaches, it's not so hard to believe. But in the end, even though a lot of different parts of the Lavender Town syndrome appear to be at least plausible, the most condemning pieces of evidence against the legend are the facts. Yes, there was another version of the song that causes headaches. It is the beta version, the version of the song that was never finished and never made it into the games. This version, it's rough, it's horrible, but not because it's scary or anything. It's because, well, it's painful. I'll leave the link to it in the description, and once you hear it, you'll understand two things. One, that it is truly capable of causing migraines, but nothing more. And two, why it never made it into the game in that version. The version that we ended up with, it's the one that has been playing in the background and the one that I've been hearing a lot editing this video. And my will to kill myself, it's still the same. That is entirely dependent on how much coffee have I had. In conclusion, a lot of possible truths doesn't always result in one scary true legend. And even though Lavender Town has a lot of scary stories to tell, the story about how it was responsible for the death of many kids, it's not one of them. At least, that's what the evidence says. And the evidence hardly ever lies. And with that, case closed.